Hey guys, this is recording. I've just been a bit like I've just been a bit emotional, and I thought that's the time to come out and talk about the messy middle, right? Right? Authenticity is about sharing what's going on as close to the time of the impact as possible. And I know I like doing my audio. Sorry, I haven't even thought about my background people because my raps are usually audio. But I thought, fuck it, let me put the video on. So lots of change has been going on, lots of up leveling into the next phase, right? Which is needing to know more about business, needing to adapt my skills to where I want to go to the next level. And it's totally uncharted territory. And I do have amazing, like the right people are just showing up in my life, which is pretty incredible. And the relentless drive to keep pushing forward to reach potential is hard, and it's relentless. The clue's in the word, right? And I think what's triggered this off, I had a bit of stress building up to a talk that I had to do that was a little bit out of my comfort zone. And so my adrenaline sort of pumps up when that sort of thing happens. I'm in a new relationship. I'm trying to figure that shit out because who knew I had trust and intimacy issues, right? So that's like this little side hustle, which is filled with goodness as well. But mostly, I am writing a book. So it's the book that I've wanted to write and that people have asked me to write for a fucking long time. I'm doing more and more talks and people are saying, when's the book coming out? Oh, your story, you should write a book. And I'm like, yes, I should. But then I get riddled with the self-doubt of like, well, my life, there are people with worse lives. Like, who am I to write a book? And apparently everyone has that, like, especially when you write something that's sort of heartfelt from your story. We question it and we go, who am I to do the thing, right? And then fear and all the reasons why we shouldn't do it pop up. And the closer you get to the thing, it feels like the more that stuff pops up everywhere, all of the time, which is surprising because probably not, because I've delayed doing this, even though I've had the idea in my head for quite some time. And what I've really not wanted to do, right, what I'm trying to avoid, and my excuse for not writing the book for a long time, is that I don't want to do one of those sensationalist, I was raised in a cult kind of poor me tales where there's so much detail about the, graphic, abusive nature or the sexualization or the stuff that's like, how bloody dare they kind of grow you up in that environment and what was out of my control and poor me. And it's really tricky because there's so much gray area. Like I see my childhood as one that was generally happy, but also when you're in the bubble of what's normal, you don't question it because you're a kid, right? And so I'm trying to capture in this book. So let me tell you about the book. So the book is essentially a self-help book. Like I want to pass on all the learning that I have generated and done through the hard graft of rock bottom and building my own life up. I want to generate that learning and some of those challenges, some of the questions that help me, some of the resources. I want to have that all in a book, but I want those pieces of information to just be highlighted by my story. So why do I know this to be true? Why can this sort of mindset or tool help you through something? And it's very much because I experimented with these things myself in order to move me through a rock bottom point, right? So in theory, beautiful. I don't want a ghostwriter. I don't want a co-writer. I want to do this myself. And I don't even think that's an ego thing. I think I have a very particular voice and I hear it in my head and there's like a certain pace. And I feel like it will be really hard for me to instruct somebody in how to replicate that. But also, I think my pace and voice isn't for everyone. And it's quite kind of hard hitting and it's quite, for fuck's sake, sort your shit out. And the despair was intense despair and the ambition is intense ambition. And lots of people are somewhere in the middle of that, but also makes me think that it could relate to lots of people. Because wherever you are in that continuum, you might want to move like 2 steps forward or one step, or just get out of that rock bottom, think about what's possible. And I want to be able to offer some of my psychotherapy knowledge, some of my coaching knowledge, but again, very much applying it to how I learned this for myself. And so sounds just like a project, right? It's just easy. So there's two problems here. There's probably more that I may unleash, but there's two that I know for sure. One is big picture, like the lack of big picture thinking. So carving out the time to write a book, it's time intensive, it's emotionally intensive. And I've never done it before, which means I need to learn about structures, and where it makes sense in my head doesn't mean it's going to make sense in the reader's head. I often skip huge chunks because they weren't dynamically memorable to me, but you kind of need them as the reader to actually make sense of where I've jumped to, right? So I need that advice and guidance. I need to deal with feedback in order to have the chunks sort of make sense to the reader, because I just jumped into this low point, jumped in, there's a lot of learning there. And my grand excuse for not getting it done is reactive behavior. And I think we all do that. It's like we react to the immediacy of tasks in front of us. So one of them is lack of big picture thinking, where I haven't got time for the book, but then I know that if I put the book out, it will add value to the impact that I can create through credibility, through allowing people to truly understand my journey. And mostly, I don't give a fuck about any of that. Mostly, if the tools that I learned can help one person to kind of not have to stay in that rock bottom as long as they did, or to pass on some tools to their kids about resilience, or give them some peace of mind about how we can reframe the journey that we're going through and look at it as one of growth and challenge, and that any challenge that comes up at us is just an opportunity for developing ourselves. I'm so glad I'm doing this, because I'm like coaching myself through my meltdown, right? So one of them is prioritizing the time, understanding how long it takes to actually do this shit, right? And being reactive. And I say reactive, I've worked bloody hard to build momentum when it comes to the training and development company, when it comes to coaching clients, when it comes to all the other aspects, because I have so many kind of things under the umbrella, and I thrive off of that. I know there's advice and guidance out there from some business coaches to like hone in on one thing. My brain just doesn't work that way. I like working lots, but I like variety. I love doing kind of the talking stuff. I actually walked down the road and was like, I pretty much make a living out of talking. How fucking cool is that? My blabbermouth voice, and it's hilarious because I didn't have a voice as a child. I felt like I didn't have a voice. I felt like I didn't know how to communicate or what to say and all the rest of it. And here I am making a living out of talking. Fancy that, right? So maybe for anyone, like, find the thing that you love the most, do it a shitload, get really good at it, and hopefully you can make a living out of it, right? I'm not sure that's like the soundest advice, but that's where I come from, and I feel like it rings true to me. Okay, so the one thing is the big picture thinking and prioritizing time. And the other one's just fear, I guess, is the headline. So fear of, so many things, so much fear. One is the fear of delving back into experiences that were difficult. So wanting to draw out the learning, but as David Goggins says in his book, Can't Hurt Me, you never want to revisit those places once you've built yourself out of them. You just never, you look forward and you never want to go back. And the process of writing this book and being open and trying to bring out the learning for other people is that we have to go back in. And I almost had these rose-colored glasses on of going, well, I had a pretty good childhood, and I did. That is actually true. Like, my parents were good people, and we were safe, and we traveled to different places, and there was so much value that I can now see from that way of life. And if I really delve into some of the examples of some of the crazy shit that was linked to our belief system, it's crazy, right? It's like, like exorcisms and public punishments and being raised as the generation that was meant to be pure and that is meant to save the world. Like, that's a lot of pressure, like psychologically, underneath the fact that we ate 3 meals a day, and that we, there was music and there was connection and there were lots of good things that we didn't have to worry about. There was this ideology that it was spiritual warfare, that we were constantly meant to be on high alert, I guess, for Armageddon. Like, I hope you guys understand what I'm talking about. For like immediate changes, and I see these triggers in my own life now, that if there's a threat of something flipping in some way, like it's almost it translates into slightly controlling behavior, as in, let me manage people's happiness, the group that we're in, the 10 steps ahead, and use all my energy to be there just in case, you know. And I feel like it harks back to the past of like the threat of Armageddon, the threat of the world ending, the threat of all of these things, houses being raided, like police coming, like all this stuff. The threat of that is still sometimes somewhere deep in my psyche and my physical trauma reactions to life now. But I'm sidestepping into the present, right? And the challenge of the fear of going back is, first of all, if I'm going to get this right and put this down in paper in a way that I'm proud of and that is useful, it's emotional and it might hurt. And there were some situations that it's really hard to revisit, such as a rape incident that I experienced, such as being suicidal, such as being an alcoholic parent, such as being a really shitty girlfriend, and such as being really cruel to a lot of people. And there's things that I need to face up to in order to write this book in a fair way, because it isn't just my rant at the world. It's trying to be balanced and fair, and then I also have to think about the impact of including anybody in my peripheral life, right? So my siblings are a strong part of my story, but I'm also aware that it's my perspective, it's my version of the story that I'm telling, and it's not fair to implicate them in my version of the story. And so, of course, I'll change names and a few things, but also I can only tell my story as it's affected me. And this is what I'm being careful of. The other thing is, I talked to sort of an ex-member of the cult a little while ago who has a book out, who has written a sort of a positive book, but also, you know, a deeply personal account of her experience. And she said to me, she was like, my family's disowned me, like people don't talk to me, they think I've sensationalized it, all the things I'm afraid of, right? I am now cut off, like people don't agree with my version of events, and therefore it's like black or white. You're either for us or against us. You're either loyal or you're out and you're against us, and you're one of those detractors and these horrible people that we read so much about, who were, you know, pawns of Satan trying to create, you know, dissension and all the rest of it in communities and in families. And we've lost a lot. We've lost a lot already, right? I feel I've lost a lot of grief, a lot of goodbyes, and I have to battle with the idea of me writing a book being the last, that's me cutting something, the last sort of choice to be on the other side of the fence and to lose out on more people. And I can't lose my siblings. We've been through too much together, you know. I can't. And I'm estranged from my stepfather, who I consider my father, and I will always hold the hope that we will rebuild things. And would writing this book be sort of inadvertently the final straw where that hope needs to be severed as well, that we will never repair things because we have fundamental disagreements about certain things. Am I willing to pay that price? Am I willing to pay the price of impacting more people, I believe, with the lessons that I've gained? Because that's the premise of the book. The premise is the lessons, but I can't just do the lessons without giving some context. And so I'm in this like bizarre choice situation of going, what do I include? What do I not include? What's valuable to the story? I obviously, part of my story was witnessed by my ex-husband when I was in the depths of despair. And is that my story to tell? It's an internal journey. Is it my story to tell? Even my kids were implicated in the early stages of my behavior and what I was recovering from. Is that fair? Is it fair? But equally, I know, and my whole life has changed because of the idea that when we live in shame and we hide, I've hidden so much of my life. So much of my life has been a double life. One where I've been good and perfect on this side, and one where I escaped and hated myself on this side. And the way that I've improved my mental health, and I think it applies to a lot of us, is taking that double life of the front-facing perfection and the hidden shame, self-harm, addiction, self-hatred, self-loathing, overeating, pain, trauma, like that side. And I've had to learn to align them in some version of truth. Not some version of truth. That's not right. In my whole authentic self, so that who I am on stage is the same person I am with my friends. Who I am in the workplace is the same person I am with my children. And what I mean is the authentic energy from which I come from, the intention with which I set to be present, to have integrity, to be honest, to the best of my ability to be a good person, to think about others, and equally to have boundaries and look after myself, to be direct, but communicate with kindness, like all of these things, for me to set some conscious behavior, conscious thinking behind that whole person, and no longer have this hidden version of myself that is so dark and so horrific that I must work as hard as I can to keep the perfection side alive so that you never question that anything else is going on. And of course, what led to my rock bottom is that the cracks were beginning to show and there was like leakage between both of these. I couldn't sustain the perfection side anymore. I could only, it was like, like a dam. What's the Dutch thing? The dam and the finger in the dam, or the ship with a leaking something. I didn't have enough hands to like stop the leaks, right? There were too many leaks. I'm kind of doing this because I feel like I'm processing my intention and what I want to do, and almost having some public accountability of what actually is important. And I think this is what's important. When it's hard, it's usually the direction we need to go in. I really genuinely feel that. I feel like this is hard because it's important. I feel like it's really hard and really emotional because it has the potential to be emotive to the listener, to the reader, to the person who's like still in that like secret shame hole and doesn't quite know how to move themselves out of it. And if there's anything as far as my purpose and what I'm doing, I want to support people and be the catalyst for change, right? I want to support people in knowing, having a bit of a shakeup and going, there is another way. Sitting in your victim mentality is only ever going to keep you there, right? If you keep doing what you've always done, you're just going to get the result you always got, right? So we got to switch up how we approach life, the habits that we have, things that we do, and that change in our sort of neural pathology and creating new habits and pathways is hard, and that's fine. Like embrace the pain in a way. Sometimes it's really lonely though. Sometimes it's really lonely to have this feeling of purpose and of ambition so entrenched in every core and fiber of your being that not everyone gets it. You know, some advice has been, just be careful, watch out, wait till you have time to write the book. Are you sure it's the right thing? Maybe you should have a ghostwriter. Maybe you should do this. And then, of course, there's the like, let's actually focus on those early years of sensationalist bullshit. I think that's what the reader is going to be interested in. And I'm just like, fuck off. No, I know what I want to create. I do. Like, it's really hard because I'm not an expert. I haven't written a book before. That isn't my skill set. But communication is, I believe. I know I'm all convoluted today, but I feel like communication is my skill set that has developed over time through speaking, through training, through therapy, having it and giving it, and through coaching, also having it and giving it. And I want to communicate. I want to communicate what I've learned to the listener. I want to communicate to the person who emails me and messages me on LinkedIn and on Instagram DMs and goes, I'm in this situation, like the stories I hear, right? Like even much worse than mine, or very different. Like everyone's perspective is different, of domestic violence, of childhood abuse, of addiction that led to much worse places than me, with, you know, shooting up and being street homeless. And just like, people are trusting me with their stories. And of course, on the podcast, people are trusting me with their stories, and they're trusting you with their story. And I want to be able to communicate the things that have worked for me to get me to a point that I am at with, which is feeling privileged to work for myself, feeling so privileged to be able to have a voice. I mean, like, you guys don't know how, I mean, those of you who haven't had a voice at some point in your life will understand the immense gravity of simply having a voice. You will understand. And I want to communicate what worked for me, not so much because my framework is exactly right or you should replicate it exactly the way I did, but simply to provoke thinking and to provoke the mindset to experiment with all of the things that are out there that can shift the trajectory of your life. If you stay in a fixed mindset and you stay stuck in, as in this is the way it always is because it always was, you were more likely to stay there, right? And I remember only going to the friends and the people where I could reinforce that my belief system was right. And we do it all the time, and Facebook algorithms now help us do that, right? Let's just reinforce our belief system. And the way I would tell my story, the way I would communicate then is like, fuck, this is hard. This is hard. This was my past. That made it hard. And if you listen to my story and the way I told it with like tears in my eyes, right? You'd be like, fuck, that's hard. That is hard, right? And then I'd be like, yeah, they think it's hard, so therefore it is hard, and let's just repeat that little game, right? We got to talk to different people. We got to hear different things, but mostly we have to put different things into action. And I've gone into rant zone, right? And really, I was literally having a meltdown before doing this, going, can I write a book? But it's too hard. What do I include? What do I omit? What do I really want to say, and who really wants to listen? I had all that shit going on in my head. And now I've pumped myself up. Because I'm like, fuck it. You only live once, right? You literally only live once. And who cares, right? And I believe there are ways for me to communicate to the people that are important to me, and be careful and mindful to not tell their story because it's not my story to tell. But I think there's enough drama. There's enough drama in my story that is about me and is my story to tell, that will allow me, or act as that catalyst to allow me to talk to you about the tools that I've utilized to get me through that point, and that I continue to utilize. And I don't think people get this enough, that just because you've come through a rock bottom point and you've learned some tools to get there, sustainability and maintenance are keys to allowing us to keep our resilience pumped up, so that when life throws some more curveballs at us, which it will, right? And also that we almost relish it. So I'm like, oh my God, I have this privilege of telling my story. And I've got this privilege of running my own business. And it might not always be this way. It might not. I might get a job one day. Stuff might happen. I don't fucking know. And that's fine too. I don't need to know it all, and I don't need to control it all. Oh, I just heard myself say that, right? And writing a book and putting it out there, especially when some of it is deeply, deeply, deeply personal, is hard. It's going to be hard. Just because it's like raw and it's revisiting, and everyone's got a fucking opinion. Everyone's got an opinion on what your story should be, or how you should phrase it, or what you should cover. And I'm trying to really practice a growth open mindset around feedback, so that I really listen if it's about the structure and it's about how other people can fully understand what it is I'm trying to say. I am not always right, but I do have my own experience, and I do want to hold on to the type of book that I want to write. It's quite important to me to hold on to the type of book that I want to write, and that is one which gives people tools, and it's more of a self-help book than an autobiography, because my story doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Everyone has a story, but that's the message that I want to get across, is that everyone has a story. So translate what I'm trying to teach and offer into your own story, and I think we'll have some challenges in there for people who really want to dig deep and work their way through it. So guys, what fear are you facing at the moment? What fear is showing up in your life that's fucking with your head and making you go, ooh, because you might have really logical reasons why you shouldn't do it. I feel like mine are pretty logical, been through a lot, don't want to tell other people's story. I really don't want to be a sensationalist cult kid. And so is this what I should be doing? Maybe I should safely write some books about HR policies and about mental health at work, which is a good primary part of my business. Maybe that's what I should do. And I should come across as academically knowledgeable and instruct them on a perfect framework for how to focus on mental health at work. And that's the part of me that is still remembers myself as the uneducated kid, really wants to be that person. Because I want to be like, ooh, I've got a book out that's going to help you at work and whatever. But my heart, people, my intuition is saying that's not the first book. There may be some information out there. Cool. Who cares? There's plenty of books out there. But my story is one that only I can tell. And my learning is one that only I can tell. And it's your job to translate that into your own world. And I have to take that risk. What risk do you need to take, people? What risk? I'm so glad I only barely cried, because I was a shit show a minute ago. Appreciate you listening. Feel the fear and do it anyway, as they say, but also get some support in place. But the right support, because I'm actually choosing to turn the volume down on support when it comes to the book for now, because I need to listen to my own voice first. And so there's something useful in knowing how to weave in and weave out of getting support in the shape of advice, because sometimes advice just drowns out the voice inside your own heart. So be careful about that. And if you have a reflection practice, whether that's walking, meditation, whatever it might be, hone that practice, hone the journaling, whatever it might be, to trust your own voice before fully trusting other people's. And once you got that foundation, like I know what the foundation and the energy of the book that I want to write, and I want to get my voice down on paper in different ways. Once that's strong, I will then open it up to feedback from experts around structure and, all things professional around book writing. But listen to your own voice. What's your own voice telling you today that you might be ignoring? Hey, thanks for joining me on this random rant to do with dealing with fear and facing up to the thing that is challenging you. Wish me luck, people. Hope you get the book when it's out. Wish me luck. Bye.